Well, hello and welcome to the 2019 version of Lydia Lenten Reflections. I'm Pastor Scott Simmons of Lydia Place, and with me is
Beth Gallen. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, of Lydia Place.
Lydia Place, yeah.
Who's been involved and as a leader with the Lydian community for going on 4 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you think about that. So,
yeah.
So what we intend this to be this year is a weekly Lenten reflection on the psalm that accompanies the weekend preaching text through the narrative lectionary. And we will reflect on this in a video format. We'll post it online every Wednesday, later in the afternoon, early evening. And then we'll follow up with a live Lydian worship, Lenten worship, later in the evening, likely around 8 p.m. Central Standard Time because of some other worship opportunities that I'm engaged with my other call, which is at Bethlehem Lutheran in the Midway, and we have Lenten, not Lenten. We have Lenten worship and dinner from 6 p.m. Till about 7:30, 7:45. And joining Beth and I over here is our youngest Lydian. This is lovely Amelia Gallen, who's almost 1 year old. Yeah, and
Almost.
she's enjoying blueberries and Cheerios while Mom and I work on this reflection. So our reflection today is from Psalm 16 and verses
5 to 8.
5 to 8. So Beth will read, and then I'll read. We'll take a little bit of time in between to just ponder, and then we'll have a small discussion, and then post this for you to think about. And we invite you on the post, on the comments on the post on our Facebook page, to go ahead and make your own comments. We'd like to invite commentary and
Absolutely.
see how this appeals to you, what it draws out of you, what the text is saying to you on this first Wednesday of Lent.
The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel in the night. Also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved.
The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. So Beth, as you were thinking through this, earlier today in preparation, what jumped out at you about this text?
So this particular psalm is one of trust and confession of faith, and there's some praise mixed in there as well. And some of the reading that I was doing about this psalm. Well, first I think we should know that the verses we read are the middle portion of this psalm. There's a stanza before and after this one that we read. And this middle section is largely about praise. But in addition to it, what I learned today was also that these are like, the psalmist was likely a Levitical priest. And what we know about the tribe of Levi was that they were a tribe that did not inherit land. And this matters in the first century, and this matters for religious groups in that time period, because land is tied to well-being. And so there's something really, yes, Amelia, there's something really radical about this confession of faith, especially in verse 6 when this psalmist writes, "The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places." This is radical because the boundary lines are not tied to a physical place, and that they have fallen in good places. It's less about this land and more about this relationship with God. That it's really powerful and ironic that this person can say, even though I don't have land as my inheritance, I have this relationship with God.
For God has chosen my lot.
Yep.
For God has chosen my lot.
Yep.
And that's really an interesting insight. Because truly the Levitical priests did not have land, and they were supported actually by the gifts that were given by all the other tribes who had land, who brought their gifts to the temple,
right,
or to the worship area, the worship space. They brought that to for sacrifice and giving, and the Levites would actually would sacrifice and take. Some of it went to God, and some of it went to feed themselves, right, and to support themselves. But I think that the connection to being tethered, how you earlier said when we were talking before this, that the identity of the other tribes, and not only the tribes of Israel, the other tribes that lived in that area, were all tied to the land they possessed. So identity was tied to what they possessed, what they, what places they occupied, right?
Yeah.
And the Levites were untethered from that. So their identity was found in something else. And I wonder how that relates and transfers in this day and age, when we think about it, to those in our own culture who live untethered lives, whose identity is untethered to the places that we ground identity to, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier was in our modern world, especially here in the United States, where land is so common, right? People just have land, right? But then I thought about, well, actually, renters, people who do not own land but rent, and how are they experiencing the assurance of God, even when their boundary lines, their physical boundary lines, do not belong to them, right? Or people who experience poverty, right, as well. How are they experiencing the goodness of God? How are they experiencing being tethered to God?
Well, and I think there's an interesting thought that just occurred to me, Beth, in that when you live a renter's lifestyle, and I certainly did in my graduate school days, and for many years into my early 30s, before I actually purchased a home or land, you tend to be immersed you tend not to rent and stay for a long time.
Right.
There's a sense of movement and transience and wandering. It's almost like a wilderness experience, where you move into an area and you might rent for a year and move on to another, and you are immediately removed physically from that community. So community becomes a different thing.
Yeah.
The community becomes the relationships you gather over the years, but not necessarily the neighborhood that you have been landed and tied to for 15 years. Right.
And how do we let go of maybe some of these feelings of insecurity that might produce, and firmly set ourselves in this tethering to the goodness of God, who the boundary lines don't exist for, right? The goodness of God, this relationship with God, that is what holds us and centers us. I think that's a really important notion to think about in this season of Lent, right? A season of turning back to God, of returning to God, of repentance, but there's a call in that to let go of what we think tethers us,
Mm-hmm.
and to turn back to the ultimate source of love and goodness, which is God, right? God is calling us back to this relationship.
And perhaps, Beth, it's what are those things that not only tether us but hold us from becoming who God is asking us to be, right? Those harmful things that hold us,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's harmful relationships or it's
Fear,
whether it's
money,
money, fear, all those things that as we turn back, we're turning back into a loving relationship where we're really called to embody that relationship to others.
Yeah. And of course, like us, we also have to recognize too that we're reflecting on these things, that it's actually God who beckons us back, right?
Right.
It's God who beckons us back. And God who leads us to places where our boundaries will fall in pleasant places. Right?
Now later tonight, following in our worship at online worship, Facebook Live, we'll be listening to we'll be reading the preaching text for this week, which is Matthew 20, the story of the workers in the vineyard.
Oh goodness!
And who some of the workers work all day, and some who come later or who are hired later are given the same wage, right? And that's an interesting thing because the goodness comes from God, the promise comes from God, and the same wage is offered to all.
Mm-hmm.
We are about done, aren't we, Amelia? So I would ask, Beth, do you have a question you would like to leave with everybody? What are those? Yeah, what would you leave as a question?
What?
Yeah, come to me. I get to do this.
I think the question I would leave people with to reflect on today and the remainder of this week are, what are the things that you need to let go of?
Yeah.
That hold power, that maybe give you a false sense of boundary, right? What are some of the things you need to let go of so that you can experience God tethering God's self to you? That's my question.
That's a great question. Well, there we are. Week 1 for Beth and our little Lydia and Amelia.
Who will likely join us.
Who will likely join us every week. Yes, you will.
Oh,
I gotta kisses. Oh, aren't you jealous, Grandma? All right, we'll see you.
I'll close us up. God's peace to you in your Lenten journey.